Okay, welcome back Science 30s to our next lesson in Chapter 3. This is 3.5, and today we're going to be talking about the immune response. People are often afraid of being harmed by large-scale life, such as bears or sharks or tigers, or maybe even small insects all the way down to spiders. These are common things that we're afraid of harming us. But in reality, there's things that are a lot smaller that are around us all the time and are pretty much always trying to harm us. These things are called pathogens, and there's a whole bunch of different types of these things that are trying to invade our bodies and make us sick. We're going to talk about two on this slide, the first one being bacteria. Bacteria are small single-celled organisms that look like this. They could be kind of a round shape over there, a little bit more linear, or kind of in this spiral that we can see on this side. And these bacteria are pretty much everywhere. They're all around on all sorts of surfaces. And if they do get inside us and live off of us, they make these toxins that can make us sick, and we can get sick with bacterial infections. Now that doesn't mean that all bacteria are bad. There are actually some bacteria that are good for us and can do our bodies well, but there's lots of types that can cause us harm. Let's look at the next category, which is talking about a virus. A virus is a small package of DNA. It's not even big enough to be considered a cell. It doesn't have all the parts to a cell, and it can't replicate on its own. It looks like this on a very, very tiny scale, and it looks kind of like a scary kind of ball of spikes. And like I mentioned, this can only replicate within other cells. It doesn't have the ability to replicate on its own. So it lands on our cells, and if it can invade our cells, injects its genetic material into our cells and kind of hijacks our nucleus and uses the nucleus to make copies of itself, makes a whole bunch of itself in our bodies, and ends up making us sick. So these are kind of scary little guys. So as it shows here, they use the host nucleus. We get sick with it. Uses our nucleus, which is able to read and copy DNA, and it uses that to make more of itself. And similar to the bacteria, there's viruses all around. There's bacteria and virus all around in the environments that we interact with, and they're always trying to get into our bodies, live off us, and make us sick. But fortunately, our body has an immune system which is going to help us to protect against these pathogens. It's actually incredible how strong and complex our immune systems are. So let's dive deeper into what the immune system is. And we're going to start with the physical barriers or the physical defense. How do we stop pathogens from getting into our body and making us sick? And the first one is skin. It's probably underrated, but skin is a very impressive material that is water resistant. It can heal after it gets damaged, and it's flexible to allow us to move in all types of different ways. So it's a collection of cells that does a really good job of keeping bacteria and other pathogens out. Our next line of defense would be hair. Now this isn't talking about the hair that is coming off of your head and just flowing down, although that has some uses. I'm talking about the hair that stops from things coming into your body, such as the hair in your nose, or hair on your eyelashes or in your ear, or hair that's going to try and stop things from getting into your body. Another thing we have for physical defense is mucus. Now mucus is pretty gross, as we see a picture of a sneeze here. We don't really like mucus, it's pretty gross, but it has an important role in, again, stopping things from going into our body. And we have it in most openings to our body, probably most familiar being the nose and then phlegm in our mouth. This is really good at trapping pathogens that may have got into these openings and trying to stop them there before they get further into our body. Kind of similar to mucus, but not quite as gross, is tears. The fluid that is in and around our eyes can have some benefits of protecting us from pathogens getting in that way. So we just have another form of protection there. And the last one here is stomach acid. So if you unfortunately ingested maybe some food that went bad and had bacteria or fungus, or that you had contacted a virus and it touched your mouth and it went into your stomach, we still have some defense here from it getting into our blood, and that the stomach is very acidic and is going to break down and wreck or destroy any pathogens before they can hurt us. So we have some pretty good physical defenses to stop pathogens from getting into our body and causing infection. But unfortunately that breaks down sometimes. We might get a cut and be open to infection. We might breathe something in and be open to infection, or it might get past this physical barrier. So what happens In that case, we have our second line of defense, which is our non-specific defense. So these are chemicals or cells in our body that are going to be looking for pathogens and fighting them off if they find them. So the first one is a macrophage, which is a white blood cell that patrols and destroys pathogens. So you can see this white sphere going through our blood, and if it finds a pathogen, it's going to grab onto it and destroy it. Go looking for another one, grab it, and destroy it. So these are really good things to have in our body. And the next one has a super scary name, but fortunately it's scary for pathogens, not for us. It's a natural killer cell. And this uses an enzyme to destroy infected or cancerous cells. So I'm actually going to go to the next slide here to show you what these killer cells do. They can identify cells of our own body that have been infected with a pathogen or have become cancerous. And then they're going to use an enzyme to destroy these cells. So they were once our own cells, but they got infected and we say, Kate, we're going to kill that one off, or it became cancerous and said, Kate, we need to stop that right there. So let's say we have this cell and it's got this marker showing that it's all healthy. A killer cell can look at this and say, okay, you're good to go. So the killer cell comes in, he kind of uses this kind of checking system to say, okay, you have the right marker to say that you're healthy, you're good to go, I'm not gonna kill you. And he's gone. But if a different cell gets infected with a virus and comes and is looking like this, it has a different marker. He's feeling pretty sick because he's sick with the virus. He has a different marker showing that he's infected. When the killer T cell looks at that and says, this is a problem, this isn't something that's good, he's going to create this enzyme and is going to destroy this cell so it doesn't cause any further damage. The virus in it doesn't keep replicating. So that is a very useful immune response. So back to this slide, had another picture of a killer cell here destroying an infected cell. Now, if that doesn't work, if things are getting by our macrophages and getting by our killer T cells, we're kind of losing the battle against an infection. We still have some other things that we can do. And one of them is the inflammatory response. So the inflammatory response is when we are going to dilate our blood vessels and send lots of blood. This might happen if you're injured or get a cut. You may notice some swelling, and it's trying to send blood there because blood has a lot of good things. It's got nutrients, it's got oxygen, and it's also got more white blood cells and killer cells to go fight off infection. So it's basically trying to give this area all the help that it can take. You also might notice that if you have a cut or an injury, it feels fairly warm if you have some swelling, and that's trying to increase the temperature to increase metabolism of those cells so that they can heal faster. So kind of all hands on deck, sending everything to that spot to try and help out as best as it can. Now this can happen in a large amount of your body or a small amount of your body. If you're getting an allergic reaction or something like a mosquito bite, sometimes you'll get very localized swelling. Other times you might have swelling of larger parts of the body. Okay, but that's the purpose for swelling. Now, if that's not working from certain infections, you might get a fever. And a fever is when you get very, very warm. Your body temperature rockets, and this can be a dangerous thing. But what your immune system is trying to do is basically saying, okay, we've tried all these systems, we're still losing, let's just cook everything in the body by raising the temperature. So it's good that your body is trying to fight it off, but a really high temperature can also become dangerous. So often if it gets too high, it might end up being going to the hospital to try and reduce the body temperature if it gets out of control. But again, this is the body trying to just kind of cook and destroy whatever is remaining. Now, as if that wasn't complex and impressive enough, we have another line of defense called the specific defense. This has to do with immunity against specific things. So our body is able to actually recognize not just a virus or a bacteria as being something bad, but a specific type of virus or a specific type of pathogen. Okay? So how it's going to do that is it's going to use antibodies and antigens. Okay? So to show what this means, if a pathogen comes in here, all right, pathogen is over here, he's got these markers on him. So he's got these yellow triangles that identify him as a certain type of pathogen. That type of pathogen has that marker. And then if we have a white blood cell come in here, he's got these projections that are going to look for that type of antigen. It's looking for this type of pathogen. So if he moves over here, these identifiers are called antibodies. He moves over, and if that antibody matches, He says, okay, I know what that cell is. I've recognized it's a bad thing. I know what this is. We need to fight it. Now, how our body makes these antibodies and uses them in the defense against pathogens specifically is quite a complex process. We're going to go through that process fairly simplified, so we're going to be missing some parts as it's quite a detailed process to look in fully, but we're going to go over the major parts here. So let's take a look at how we can fight specific pathogens. So first, let's bring in some pathogens. They're coming in here. We have a set of them, and they're going to infect the cell. Where we're going to start is we're going to have a white blood cell or a macrophage that is going to engulf and destroy them. Okay, so he's going to destroy and ingest. This is called phagocytosis, where it wraps around the pathogen and destroys it. Now, we saw that from before, but now we're looking at the specific immune system is he's actually going to project the antigens of what he just destroyed. So after he kills it, he's going to put those markers on the outside, basically signaling to the body, this is what I just fought off. And then the body's going to say, okay, let's figure out what that was. So then we're going to have these helper T cells come in and try and recognize what that pathogen is. So if this recognizes what it is, it says, okay, I know what this is now. I can get ready to fight it, and it's going to send a signal for more help. So this is a helper T cell giving a signal for more help. And the next type of cell that comes in is the B cells, and I like to call that backup. So we figured out, okay, this is a problem. I know what this is. It's going to get us sick. I'm going to call in for backup. So in comes our backup, and they've got lots of these antibodies. And what they're going to do with these antibodies is they're going to fight this specific pathogen with this specific antibody. So it's going to chuck all these antibodies at it, rain it down, and we can see that it's fitting or lining up on those antigens of the pathogen. So let's keep that straight. The antigens are the markers, and it's sending antibodies to match up to the antigens. Now, I kind of like to think of these as handcuffs. It's kind of stopping this pathogen from being able to do anything. If these were markers or spikes that allowed the pathogen to get into our cells, we've kind of blocked them and made them disabled. So think of it as kind of handcuffs. It disables them. Okay? And then once they're disabled and they can't do us any harm, then we have some white blood cells that are going to come in and wipe them out. All right. Now, this whole process has jacked up our immune system. We're making tons of all these B cells, and we need to stop this once we've finished fighting off the pathogen. So we need this other type of cell to come in and say, okay, we're done. We don't have to keep fighting this anymore. We need to slow the immune response. So that's our suppressor T cells. And the last part, which is really important, is we have another type of cell that once this has slowed down and we're now healthy again, we have this type of cell, which is a memory T cell. It is going to remember this battle that went on in our body and the type of antibodies we had to make. So it's going to remember that. So if we ever recognize that type of pathogen again, we're going to be ready to fight off even faster, and we won't get sick from it the next time. So I'll step out of the way here so we can look at this recap in our notes, starting with the first step of the macrophage undergoing phagocytosis to a pathogen, or engulfing it and destroying it, and then displaying the antigens on the outside. Okay, so just there as says, shows the antigen of the pathogen on its exterior. And then in comes the helper T cell. He's going to recognize what that is and then call for backup. So the helper T identifies the antigen and then calls for the backup B cells. The B cells are going to attack that pathogen with antibodies, kind of disabling them like handcuffs. And then the macrophages engulf the deactivated pathogens and kind of destroy them. Okay. After that, we've got rid of all the pathogens. We need to stop this whole system. So we have suppressor T cells ending the immune response. And then we have our memory T cells, which are going to remember our memory T and B cells, which are going to remember this for next time in case we find that pathogen will be able to respond even quicker and may not even feel any symptoms from getting sick from this. And that's all we have for this video. So I hope that gave you a little bit of an insight to how impressive our immune response is and how we do a really good job of fighting off all these things around us trying to make us sick. And although we get sick sometimes, we have a pretty impressive immune system. Anyway, thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next lesson.